Welcome, everybody. It is Taco Movie Talks, and this is episode 4. Thank you for joining. Thank you for liking. Thank you for subscribing. And thank you for all the comments. And if you haven't done any of the above aforementioned affects, please feel free to do so. I very much appreciate all of it. And just wanted to say I've seen some of the comments and don't think that I haven't. I will be reaching out. A few people have said, they've seen movies that I've reviewed or that they would also like to review, and I'm definitely going to be reaching out to you. So be on the lookout for that. Really much, very much appreciate all the support. And if you haven't already, again, please be sure to like and subscribe. And this is episode 4, and it's going to be slightly truncated because Hoop Dreams, be on the lookout for that. Possibly tomorrow night maybe. And hopefully there is a surprise to come with it. We'll see. A lot of things in the works, but either way, Hoop Dreams, be on the lookout for it tomorrow. Very good documentary, very good sports documentary. For anyone who's seen 30 for 30, it's a lot like that except probably set the mold for those types of movies. So definitely one you're going to want to be on the lookout for. And that was the first movie that I watched for this week, and the second one that I saw, definitely a lot different than a sports documentary. It was House by Nabuku Abiyashi, and that's definitely a tongue twister there. But this was a Japanese horror film, psychedelic in a lot of different ways and insanely unique and very, very, very artistic. A lot of the stuff that it did was not a lot of effects that you would see outside of I don't even know. It was just unique to itself, really. I'm not sure exactly what movie you could compare it to. Very colorful, almost whimsical in a way. The music, the cuts and the transitions were wildly different from anything else. It I think I've heard other people describe it as almost like an 80s or 90s sitcom. I see that, and I think it's actually a pretty accurate portrayal. But on screen here, the bottom left picture and the top left picture are type of effects that were used very to great effect, for lack of a better term. But it had an unsettling nature where the music wouldn't quite match up with what was going on, where everyone is kind of being consumed by the house, and it seemed like there was some witchcraft being done in one way or another. So it really kept you unsettled all the way throughout. So in that way, it was used to really good effectiveness. It was flamboyant, it was colorful, it was different, very much unique. If you're looking for a taste of something different from what you have been experiencing with your horror movies, this will give you just that. It is very, very different. And it's not the type of direction that you're going to see from a whole lot of different films. So, my verdict on this, I gave it a 3.5 stars out of 5. I feel like you're either going to really appreciate it or you're going to hate it. And I'm not sure if there is going to be a whole lot of in between when it comes to that. The style, for some people, they're going to think it's too much sizzle and not enough steak. For me, there was enough substance to justify the style that was implemented. Very strange, and again, might not be for everyone, but I was able to enjoy it because of the spectacle that it created. Although it's not one of my favorite horror films, it's definitely a solid one. And for those of you who know about my letterbox profile, definitely check it out and see where it ranks amongst my top horror movie in my horror movies or horror lovers delight list. See where it's ranked there because I think there's a lot of good movies to check out amongst that. The second film that I will be discussing is Nosferatu the Vampyre by Werner Herzog, 1979. A remake and mixture of both Dracula and Nosferatu, which was definitely unique and interesting in that way because it took the story that I think a lot of people are very much used to and gave substance to who the character of Nosferatu was. And in that way, I thought it mixed the look of Nosferatu, which is very famous, and the story of Dracula in a very poignant way and had great themes for certain. And Werner Herzog is pretty much, in my mind, one of the greats when it comes to beautiful shots and staying on certain shots to build atmosphere and really being unafraid to show what a lot of directors either don't think to show or what they might be scared to show. The one quote that really resonated with me, it wasn't super huge thematically, but it's a great. It would work very well on the poster, so to speak. But abandon hope, all ye who he passes. Take from the quote from Dante's Inferno: "Abandon all hope, or abandon hope, all who enter." But it was very, very accurate for this story because pretty much anywhere that Nosferatu went, the city that he essentially followed the main character to, where he bought land, people were dropping dead, and they thought it was the Black Plague, which is really interesting to think in this universe that what they thought the plague was a vampire in disguise, so to speak. That was a really cool twist that I liked, and on top of that, I really, really liked the ending. I thought for Dracula, the one that I saw from Francis Ford Coppola, that I believe I reviewed on one of my prior videos, this one takes the cake for me because a lot of different areas that the film has to offer, a lot of the different elements. Werner Herzog is at least in line with Coppola, but there are certain aspects artistically. I think Herzog outdid him, and then I think as far as interpreting the story and feeling like he wanted to take it in his own direction, the ending was what definitely broke it out. So, for anyone who is familiar with Coppola and Herzog, they have two fairly similar movies. One would be Aguirre, that's a hard one to pronounce, and Apocalypse Now, where they're both based on the same um, subject material or inspired, I guess. They're not based on it. It's not both telling the same stories, but they're both certainly inspired by the same subject material. And I believe, if I'm wrong on this, please let me know in the comments. But the subject material is Into the Heart of Darkness, which was a book that was written, I believe, in the early 20th century. But anyone who's seen both movies, I think you public opinion would probably give Francis Ford Coppola the edge when it comes to comparing Apocalypse Now and Aguirre, The Wrath of God. But Um, as fate would have it, they both do very similar movies based on the same subject material in Dracula and Nosferatu the Vampyre. This one definitely giving the edge to Werner Herzog. The artistic nature, again, to kind of retread, was super well done with Herzog. And I don't know if part of that was because a lot of the scenes in Dracula focused on CGI and that type of effects, whereas Herzog found the artistic shots from just literally having a very unique eye and be willing to go to places to be able to shoot the shots, which is something he is certainly very, very famous for, where he will go to locations to find the specific shot that would make just absolutely breathtaking, beautiful shots. It's something that he injects all of his films with, and even if he might linger on certain shots for a long time, which can bloat, for lack of a better term, the runtime of his movies, it ultimately, as you become acquainted to his sensibilities and his artistic nature, I think you come to appreciate. So in that sense, it's an acquired taste, but it's one that you come to very much appreciate. And uh, by the end of this presentation or this episode, I think you will come to see that I am certainly becoming a big Herzog fan. But again, if I haven't already said it, the authenticity in this movie is absolutely phenomenal. Where the buildings, the costume design, it all feels really, really great. And on top of that, I think this is another entry where Klaus Kinski, the man who plays the lead, well, not the lead, but the villain in this movie, it's a match made in heaven, and I can see why the couple of Werner Herzog and Kinski, stuck together for 5 movies, which is, quite the run, and so far have not disappointed. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars because it's so well done. It's very interesting. It keeps you on the edge of your seat. And I think it gets across the themes of being destined to being alone is honestly the most scary thing, where it's not so much that there's someone on the loose killing people left and right to fuel his own bloodlust. Well, that is a very scary nature of the story, but to be destined to follow in the footsteps of the man who has such bloodlust, where you really cannot make connections to people, and the only connection that you will be able to find will ultimately be the end of you, but the cycle continues, which is vague enough to where I think if you haven't seen the movie, you can still watch it, and you probably won't understand what I'm saying until you watch it, but the ending is great, and that is definitely a huge separator, for in comparison to other vampire movies. Moving on, we have a classic by Alfred Hitchcock, and it is Rear Window, 1954, with Grace Kelly, uh, Jimmy Stewart, Thelma Ritter, Wendell Corey, all the above. So very great. This is, and admittedly, it's a little embarrassing, but it's my first Alfred Hitchcock entry. And besides just like scenes from Psycho, and this is definitely a great one to jump in on because it's absolutely brilliant. Honestly, to come up with this idea, I think it's so trend-setting, it's so ambitious, and it's so creative that it gives credence to what makes Alfred Hitchcock so legendary when in the the annals of history of cinema. To think we can set everything up in this apartment and shoot outwardly and have the story unfold from outside this man's apartment is it's mind-blowing. And the fact that it was pulled off so perfectly is it's even more credit to Alfred Hitchcock. And they say he's the king of, keeping people on the edge of their seat of the modern day thriller. I can definitely see that because it keeps you invested in the plot the whole way through. It keeps you in line with what the main characters are thinking and how they're trying to figure out the plot. And it was honestly super duper great. On top of that, I mean, obviously the cinematography is absolutely brilliant, and how it's able to keep you interested in the almost kind of the stage is what I'll call it, but the square block of the courthouse and the going into everyone's apartment is super brilliant, and on top of that, the colors are really, really well done where it feels like everything really pops and shows a lot of style for certain and a lot of skill too, like I mentioned previously. It has a great cast. I felt like the chemistry between, Jimmy Stewart, his nurse, and his girlfriend are really, really great. Where their dialogue kind of rolls into each other's dialogue and felt really, really dynamic and very interesting. And I'm definitely a sucker for dialogue, that's for sure. And this had really good, like almost poetic in nature, where it had a good kind of rhythm to it, where it was quick, it kept moving. This was a lean movie that didn't have very much, if any, fluff whatsoever. Was not disappointed in Hitchcock. It was brilliant, and it didn't get lost whatsoever in this film. And it kept you on the edge of your seat to the very end, which I thought the ending was pretty good. And the one thing that I had noticed from Hitchcock, just by watching certain scenes, not the entire movie, but is it all has this crispness in a weird way to the movie, and honestly, I liked the use of a green screen at the very end. I think it reminded me of a scene from Vertigo that I had saw online, just like a clip. But I personally, and I think even Birds, the use of green screen there, where it might not look entirely realistic, but I think it has this ability to kind of almost portray how scary it is, while because it's kind of not 100% realistic, where it's going to try to make it look as realistic, it honestly makes it look more intimidating, which is something that I liked, where at the very end when Jimmy Stewart is hanging outside the window and, spoiler alert, falls right before the main villain spills the beans on basically everything that happens throughout the story, and that he is indeed a murderer of his wife. I'm not sure how he was able to pull it off, but he pulled off a not, I wouldn't even call it a gimmick, but a thought or theory or a premise, and was able to see it through very skillfully, and was able to really have his talent show through. And as I said in my review, he did it with flourish. This was a great one. Definitely one that could get 5 out of 5 stars on a review, but on first viewing, I gave this one a 4.5 stars out of 5. And moving on, we are going to jump into another weird horror movie, the likes of House. This is Eraserhead, David Lynch, and we were just given famous directors or famous movies their first chance over and over again. David Lynch, obviously, very, very famous director. And this is my first David Lynch film, and certainly one of his most famous, if not, it is his most famous. Boy, oh boy, is this packed with great cinematography, symbolism, and themes. And needless to say, it's a very strange film. I'm sure you know that. If you don't know that, then yes, I mean, David Lynch is definitely a director who can go into the absurd, which I think is his production company for this film. That is definitely one way to define it, and it's probably the strangest movie up there with House. But I think it definitely outdoes House. House has kind of a semblance of straightforwardness, where this is like pretty straight all symbolism. There's like little chunks of just being straightforward, and that makes it a little inaccessible. I really, but I was putting my thinking cap on, trying to take away every little piece that I could. I think the majority of it went over my head, but for discussion's sake, I'll give a little bit of an attempt to try and make sense of what was going on. But before I get into that, again, cinematography was brilliant. You can tell it's a very thoughtful film. And also, I thought the lead did a very, very good job with what I would imagine would be a tough assignment and trying to act through this. It felt like it was really subtle, and he was able to tell a lot with how little dialogue he had and how little action he had. It was a lot of under the surface type emotion, and I thought that was super well done by him. Some of what I was able to took away was clearly, and I mean, even looking at this middle one, it is the story of birth, and I think the anxiety that a lot of new found parents will have with having a child, and how you're going to take care of the child, and how society's going to react to your your kid, and how your kid will be able to interact with society as well. I think that's a very common thought that a lot of people have, and even though it's told in a very different way, that is something that I think a lot of people are able to kind of pick up on, because it's so innate to human nature to feel like that, to have a fear like, would my kid fit in? Would my kid do well? Is he going to be successful? Expanding on that, I think the main characters' maybe insecurities are portrayed through the baby. So to explain, perhaps he's not happy with his job or feels like he is inadequate in a way. So this is like a personification of how he feels, in that he doesn't so much feel like he belongs. Maybe a little bit of imposter syndrome, where despite his age and, being an adult, he kind of feels like a fraud, in that he's not as successful as he should be, and that other people can see that he is not comfortable in his own skin, and feels like an like he is alien to other people. And I'm not sure if that's maybe too much on the nose or not, but that was a thought that I had. Certainly, that the main character does not feel super confident in who he is, and that perhaps the baby was this kind of brimming through to the surface. Um, One thing I would like to ask anyone who watched this, and I tried to stay away from other people's explanations about this, and I think I will try to read up on it now that I'm doing, once I'm done with my review. But I wasn't super clear on why there was dirt and plants growing in his dreams in his apartment. Um, I guess just to take a swing at it, maybe it was his thoughts growing, like they're gaining traction. Maybe it's just another part of symbolism to growth, like the baby was growing, and like to birth, I guess, because a lot of it was plants. Not quite sure. I would love to hear other interpretations on that. But I think some other themes that kind of bled through was I mean, certainly sex was a big theme. Like, how it is tied to birth and how that was a huge thing. And one thing that I kind of took away is maybe a thought that David Lynch was trying to get across, and again, this could be a huge swing and a miss, but that the way that society looks at sex and intercourse is so nonchalant and made to be just so much part of our society and culture that we kind of look at it without much significance. And this film is just taking the opposite view at it, where let's put the consequences and circumstances revolving around sex and just crank it up to 11, where look, it gives, there could be birth, there could be so many different side effects to birth, especially if you're not careful regarding sex and the pregnancy. And on top of that, I felt like disease was another big thing that was kind of on top of that, where the baby seemed to be diseased at certain points. The man in the main character's dreams seemed to be diseased at points where, again, if you're not careful, that is definitely a side effect that could happen with that. Then another theme certainly I think would be abortion, where, you know, if we kind of paint it black and white in this black and white film, at what point is it forgivable? If you have a child who is completely never going to be able to support themselves, where their life will pretty much just be anguish the entire time through, where they don't have you can't even truly tell if they're ever going to where you don't know if life is going to be suffering the entire time through for them. Is is abortion never right, or in certain circumstances is it justifiable? Not that is it right, but can you justify it in certain situations? Those are definitely the big ones that I took away. Oh, and one last one. I think and this one I think is probably the biggest stretch of all the ideas and thoughts that I had regarding this movie, but there was a scene where they were eating chicken and it seemed like the father was, he was definitely giving his own commentary on it. And I wonder if it was something where the effect of it was supposed to be is like genetically modified food and all walks of life, where we have cell phones in our pocket, we have televisions, a bunch of things that could potentially affect ourselves, but also our offspring. Where is this something that we should be more aware of because it could turn out to have children born with side effects, and radiation could have a huge effect. Is I think that could potentially be something he was trying to get across with that, and that might have been the message. But if not, I would certainly like to hear your takes on it because I think you could come out of this movie having a lot of different thoughts on what the theme could be. But ultimately, I did think it was very effective as far as being a horror movie because it takes responsibilities and caretaking and perverts it to the extent that it almost feels like a nightmare. So to that, I would say it is very, very effective. It's very interesting. It's scary and disturbing. And for that, I gave it a 3.5 stars out of 5. This one, I don't know. On rewatch, it I might feel the same exact way just because it is so weird. It's paced where it's very, very much artistic in it. It's paced in a way where it's going for effects with certain things, but I don't know if it would get more enjoyable upon a rewatch. Certainly, I think if you had more of an understanding, it might be, but who knows? Um, but 3.5 stars, and let's go on to the next movie, and the next one is A Star Is Born. Bradley Cooper, Lady Gaga, and what can I say besides the chemistry of these two is electric. It almost makes the whole movie. And while again I know I've said this in other reviews, romantic movies aren't my genre of choice. A really good one is super effective on me, and this was definitely the case with this one. I was supremely impressed with Lady Gaga's ability to just show pure raw emotion on screen, and Bradley Cooper was able to do that as well, which less surprising just because he's been in so many different roles and he's certainly a big star when it comes to film. But their ability to do it both on screen when together was totally breathtaking, brilliant, awesome, all of the above. But it felt real and it felt organic, and that is certainly the case. But Lady Gaga, she was amazing, and it was kind of one of those funny dynamics where Cooper was able to pull off his musical element really well, and Lady Gaga was able to pull off her acting element really well. So they were both able to dip their toes into what they weren't super comfortable or what wasn't super natural to them and do it really, really well. Also, I thought Cooper and or I guess Jackson Maine and his brother had really good chemistry. I think even the brother and Allie or Lady Gaga had really good chemistry too. They all had really nice arcs where by the end it felt like there had been almost a transformative measure from the characters that we saw at the very beginning of the film. So in that way, it was really good. And the ending, man, the ending, it did not cry as hard to this film as The Notebook, but I thought the ending was more impactful. So it definitely had that going for it. And, if I didn't say it already, the music was used to just perfect effect. The soundtrack was super good. I have literally listened to these songs on a playlist because they're that good where even not connected to the movie, there's just great music in general. And that had some scenes where the interactions between Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper are so good. It's like among my favorite scenes overall. So definitely, I think it's my favorite romance movie. It's my favorite. I wouldn't. It's not quite a musical, but anyone that highly involves music into the plot, I think it's my favorite movie as far as that is concerned. I've watched this before, and I might be watching it again just to see if the rating creeps up again because I did have it at 3.5 prior to this viewing, but it got bumped up to a 4 on this one. And if I watch it again, it very well could bump up again because I came out of this movie just absolutely loving it. And the final film that I'm going to be covering for this video of Taco Movie Talks is Fitzcarraldo by Werner Herzog, 1982. Boy, oh boy, where to start with this one? It's a very, very interesting plot where the main character is trying to take advantage of the rubber market in Peru, and one of the ways that he thinks he can do it is to pull a boat up a mountain onto, so there's different channels coming off of the Amazon, and there is one where the amount of land in between them is just it's just separated by not a small mountain, but it's the closest the two channels come. So his idea, let's take a steamboat, which I believe in real life was 30 tons, and take it from channel to channel so that we can actually get, build a colony around these rubber trees and then take it back and sell it. And it'll become a booming industry because no one has been able to access these trees due to the mountain and the rapids. On top of that, the driving force for Fitzcarraldo is he is a opera lover. The movie starts out with him going to see an opera, and me myself, self-admittedly, never have been a fan of opera, but it was honestly probably Werner Herzog's best opening to a film. It was like it was very powerful, it was very artistic, and again, everything that has to do with Werner Herzog. The shots are truly unique. He goes out and is able to just capture these little bits of brilliance that very few directors would think to go out and capture or dare to go out and capture. And on top of that, it's not even, I don't know if you could describe this as a practical effect, but he literally pulls in his case a 300-ton boat. There's so much backstory that goes into this actual movie that makes it interesting, but the movie itself is just insane. It's truly breathtaking at points, and what they were able to capture is just so magical that from scene to scene, everything drew me in to where it was either the beauty of it, the how did they do this to it, and breathing in the atmosphere of what was going on. Uh, there's truly no one like Werner Herzog. It was so unique. It was so him, and it was beautifully done. That is for certain. The plot too, I thought was absolutely amazing. Where this true life story it's so much, it's stranger than fiction, honestly, and it sounds weird on paper, and it's a weird story for sure, and thinking to tell that story is truly amazing, and to kind of art imitate life and to imitate the subject matter again made it all the more interesting. and this is one that I'm definitely going to be doing a lot more research on just to kind of get the ins and out. And I think a documentary was done on this film, so that's one that I think I'll be checking out in the future. But it was brilliantly done, and I'm a huge fan of this, and I think it's my favorite Werner Herzog movie. And I covered another one on this video, and that was Nosferatu, but this one is certainly my favorite. Again, Klaus Kinski, the lead who plays Fitzcarraldo, was super amazing, and I thought the ending was even it was even crazier than the story itself, where they're able to get this steamboat over the mountain, and they celebrate. And then the next day, while Fitzcarraldo is hungover and recovering from a night of drinking with the natives that helped him get this over the hill, they cut the boat loose. It goes down the rapids, and they aren't it to a point where they're not able to backtrack and get back to where the viable land for making rubber was. So it's like he went through hell and like an engineering kind of brilliance for essentially nothing. But in the end, he gets the boat bought from him to where he is able to kind of envision his dream, where it had been to bring an opera house to Peru, to this group of natives. But ultimately, before the boat is sold officially and taken into ownership of the buyer, he brings in an opera to do a performance on the steamboat and celebrates by sitting on a red velvet chair and smoking a cigar to celebrate him being able to bring his dream to reality by doing this performance, which it wasn't the ending I think I was expecting, but it did. This ending had you seeing a huge steamship just going down rapids, which was a sight to behold, honestly. It was, I think, more crazy than them actually pulling the ship up the mountain, honestly, as far as shots go. But together, those two shots were brilliant, and every shot was brilliant, but truly unique, and shots that you can't really replicate effectively or as effectively unless you really do them, which was, I think, Werner Herzog's motivation behind it as well. So, truly, truly cool to see. And those were all the movies for episode 4. If you have recommendations, I would love to hear them down below. Please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I love to hear from you guys. Let me know anything you've been thinking, thoughts on the movies, and recommendations. And I look forward to catching up with y'all on the flippity floop, so to speak. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.